Welcome back to our channel. Please subscribe and state your country where you are watching from. Let's dive in. Under Traore's leadership, the country initially thrived. He embarked on a mission to reform the military and bolster national defense against insurgents. His policies emphasized the empowerment of local militias, enabling communities to take a stand against the growing extremist threat. The people, once caught in a cycle of fear, now felt a glimmer of hope. However, mentors guided Traore. Some encouraged him to consolidate power, rationalizing that strong governance equated to stability. He surrounded himself with loyalists from the army, yet in doing so, he marginalized the democratic voices that sought to guide him. Despite his noble intentions, whispers of dictatorship began to circulate. In 2023, the national mood shifted. Traore's ambitious reforms stoked unrest in the populace that felt neglected. Farmers protested as crop failures persisted due to climatic shifts, while urban youth clamored for economic opportunities that remained elusive. The cacophony of dissent resonated throughout the nation. One evening, amidst a gathering of his closest advisors, Traore faced a crucial decision. The military leadership suggested a heavy-handed response to quell the unrest. Traore hesitated, recalling the very reason he had taken power, the longing for democratic freedoms. Torn between two worlds, he chose to unleash a strengthened military force. Thus began the crackdown. Reports of human rights violations flooded local and international news. Ibrahim Traore's image, once that of a revered champion of the people, transformed into that of a tyrant. As news of crackdown spread, Traore found himself contending with dissent not only from the opposition but also from factions within the military that had once supported him. A once loyal general, Youssouf Keita, who had pushed back against extremist forces alongside Traore, now turned against him. Disenchanted by the president's authoritarian turn, he developed a coalition of disgruntled officers. The bond of brotherhood among the ranks began to fray, and whispers of a potential coup began swirling. The international community grew increasingly uneasy. Neighboring countries issued warnings, branding Traore's regime as a threat to regional stability. Burkina Faso's role in fighting terrorism began to waver as concerns about internal oppression overshadowed external military efforts. As the months passed, international sanctions were imposed, further tightening the noose around the beleaguered economy. Despite resisting international pressure, Traore recognized that his methods would soon have dire consequences. As protests intensified, Ibrahim Traore's response grew more repressive. The once hopeful faces of the people morphed into expressions of fear and outrage. In an effort to pacify the masses, Traore promised a national dialogue, a conference for stakeholders across the political, economic, and civil society spectrums. On the day of the conference, an unexpected assassination attempt on Traore shook the capital. A lone gunman infiltrated the venue, but security forces quelled the attack. The near-death experience transformed Traore. He descended deeper into paranoia. The walls around him thickened as he perceived threats from every corner. Divisions in the military grew more pronounced. General Keita, emboldened by the president's vulnerability, prepared for a counter-coup. The conflict that was building within the ranks of the military set the stage for one of the most turbulent chapters in Burkina Faso's history. As whispers of impending betrayal circulated, Traore resorted to ruthless tactics. Executions of suspected dissenters, mass imprisonments, and increased surveillance. The oppressive regime he had sought to overthrow slowly became the monster he once detested. Yet, amid the chaos, resistance flourished. Activists organized underground movements, calling for justice, accountability, and a return to democracy. Traore's government, in a final desperate attempt to retain control, labeled these movements as terrorist organizations, further alienating the population. Public support waned, and the street protests grew bolder. In the midst of this, an unlikely ally emerged. Dr. Mariam Kunte, a renowned human rights lawyer and activist, ignited the spark of hope among the people. Her relentless advocacy attracted a coalition of supporters united against the injustices inflicted by Traore's administration. Traore, once the people's warrior, had become their common enemy. As protests spread like wildfire across the country, the international community began to respond. Sanctions intensified, and diplomatic relations deteriorated. The African Union condemned Traore's regime, urging him to relinquish power and avoid a civil war. Calls for intervention grew louder. The world was watching, and his narrative spiraled out of his control. Traore became an embodiment of a nation's struggle between ambition and oppression. Media channels reported on the lives lost at the hands of the regime's military, painting Traore as a dictator. His image, once polished, now appeared worn, fragmented, and desperate. The resistance culminated in a massive march in Ouagadougou, where Dr. Kunte emerged as the voice of the people, calling for Traore's resignation. The president, facing immense pressure and isolation, summoned his military advisors. The high-ranking officers, aware of the shifting tides, argued to either strike back or make peace. Divided, Traore found himself trapped in a moral quagmire. With every passing day, the rift within the military deepened. General Keita's faction grew bolder, publicly defying Traore's orders. Sensing imminent danger, Traore decided to address the nation in a televised broadcast. He stood resolute in front of the cameras, a semblance of his former self. He called for unity, love, and national healing. However, his words bore no weight. The people were already grappling with loss and mistrust. As he spoke, riots erupted across major cities, boiling over into chaos as citizens clashed with government forces. The military support dwindled, and in a moment of reckoning, Keita led a coup against Traore. The coup was swift and brutal, capturing the president and placing him at the mercy of his own allies. The nation watched in disbelief as the man who had once held the ambition of revolution became its prisoner. In the aftermath of the coup, Ibrahim Traore was a shadow of his former self. He fled the newly established regime, intent on evading arrest. Relentlessly hunted, he became a fugitive. The most wanted president in Africa. A price was placed on his head by the transitional government, while earned amnesty became a distant dream. Across Burkina Faso, loyalists remained, rallying behind him, insisting that he had tried to do right by the people. While navigating dusty trails through the bush territories of his homeland, Ibrahim found refuge in the homes of those who still believed in his vision for a united Burkina Faso. News of his escape sent shockwaves through African nations. The question loomed large: could he muster the support to reclaim power? The transitional government worked tirelessly to suppress any signs of his resurgence, declaring him an outlaw and a terrorist across the continent. Fearful of his return, neighboring countries tightened their borders, hoping to prevent Traore from organizing a counter-offensive. Yet, the spirit of rebellion still flickered within the hearts of the people who yearned for change. In hushed meetings, former supporters, activists, and local leaders gathered under the cloak of night to devise plans to reinstate Ibrahim Traore as their rightful leader. The weeks passed, and Traore's followers launched grassroots movements that aimed to undermine the transitional government. Cell phones buzzed with encrypted messages, and coded communications traveled between towns. Burkina Faso was a powder keg, and Traore had become its spark. Secret reunions united the conservatives longing for economic stability with the revolutionaries committed to human rights. As the months unfolded, several activists emerged, determined to preserve Traore's legacy while advocating for the reforms he once promised. In secret camps, discussions raged over the complexities of governance, democracy, and what future they wanted for Burkina Faso. The call for unity resonated through each faction, and whispers of uprising echoed across the small villages. Within the hearts of the people lay an undeniable truth: a president who had once evolved into an adversary had regained his stance as a symbol of their resilience. He was the voice of the people once more, evoking memories of hope against adversity. As tensions escalated, Ibrahim Traore prepared to make a bold statement. He crossed from hiding into the light. Armed with conviction and the backing of a determined populace, he resurfaced in a clandestine gathering, a rally that echoed through the valleys of Burkina Faso. Wearing his military attire adorned with the insignia of his former rank, he addressed the assembled crowd. "I have worn the armor of a soldier, the cloak of a leader, and now I stand before you as a man," he declared. "Together, we shall rise from the ashes of our struggles. If my journey began for you, then let us walk forward together." The crowd erupted, but he knew the path ahead was fraught with peril. The transitional government called for order, branding him a seditious criminal. But the seeds of change had been planted. The nation, now awakening, resolved to reclaim its sovereignty, a powerful force set against the impending tides. The struggle between the transitional government and Traore's supporters reached a fever pitch. Battles erupted across the nation. Union leaders, dissidents, farmers, and youths joined the unfolding drama, taking to the streets and fighting for their dreams. The conflict culminated in a fateful encounter. Traore's gathered forces clashed with the military, and what once felt like a dream slowly morphed into chaos. The strategic cities became war zones, and the fight for a better Burkina Faso converged into a dragging stalemate that sent shockwaves across the region. Leaders of neighboring states watched with trepidation as the conflict threatened their borders. Memories of past wars haunted the continent, tightening the grip of fear across families and communities. In a final desperate play, Traore gathered the support of influential allies and orchestrated a summit aimed at diplomacy. The session marked a significant moment for him, a chance to redefine his leadership anew. He spoke earnestly about reconciliation, while retaining the promise of liberation. The meeting garnered skepticism, hostility, and hopes, but the words of the people echoed in the corridors. Change began seeped through the atmosphere. Drenched in sunlight but woven with shadows, the nation's fate teetered precariously. Months passed, and through turbulent struggles, negotiations slowly bore fruit. The fractured nation began to mend its wounds, as average citizens yearned for stability, governance, and freedoms. The transitional government, under immense pressure, extended an olive branch, acknowledging the missteps that led to the conflict and agreeing to reforms. Despite the impending return of Ibrahim Traore, this time he emerged willingly, ready to negotiate rather than rule through fear. His presence felt weighty, yet he exhibited humility, an evolution from the dictator his critics accused him of becoming. The people voted in the referendum that followed, a historic moment where they reclaimed their sovereignty. The ballot symbolized a collective realization: true leadership does not rest in the hands of a single man but resides within the hearts of many. Burkina Faso emerged stronger and united. The scars of past injustices remained, but with Traore's returning leadership grounded in humility, the shared vision for a better future blossomed. He learned the importance of accountability, and a desire for national healing intertwined with the experience of hope. Years passed, and Ibrahim Traore moved from being the most sought-after president in Africa to an emblem of rebirth and resilience. With the support of his people, the shifting tides in West Africa became a renaissance of hope, unity, and development. Burkina Faso stood on the cusp of being a beacon of progress, showcasing the power of transformation through democracy and resilience. Traore led with the promise of freedom and justice, reminding the world that even the most turbulent journeys could yield fruitful endings. His legacy was no longer just tied to the fight for stability, it became about empowering future generations. The journey of Ibrahim Traore became a defining narrative, demonstrating that change is possible when the battle for the soul of a nation rests in the hands of its people. Thanks for watching my video. Please subscribe and share your thoughts.